Good evening from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones with your 7:30 p.m. update on Tropical Storm Beryl. Now, the good news is that Beryl has not intensified at all as we've gone through the day today, and we kind of expected that to happen. It was a very disorganized system, and it still kind of remains so this evening. So we did not expect much in the way of intensification as we went through the day today. That panned out very well. Maximum sustained winds are still near 60 miles per hour with Beryl this evening. However, we are expecting some intensification to occur as we go through the night tonight and through the day tomorrow. And Beryl is expected to become a Category 1 hurricane once again before making landfall along the central Texas coastline sometime late tomorrow night or early Monday morning. We're going to talk about all of that as well as the expected impacts across our area because there will be some. So stay tuned for all of that shortly. As always, this is a live interactive briefing. So if you have any questions as we go through our briefing, feel free to post them in our comment section and we'll be happy to answer them just as soon as we wrap up our briefing. I'm looking over here just to make sure that everything is on the up and up and working properly before we jump into it. Looks like it is. So let's go ahead and bounce into our briefing. Let me turn off the phone and email there. That's not necessary at the moment. And again, questions, throw them in there. We'll be happy to answer them. This is Beryl this evening, the visible satellite. The sun's getting ready to go down on it. But we are looking at a fairly robust area of convection of cloud cover here. This is on the north side of the center of circulation. The center of circulation is somewhere down up in this area here. Let me see if I can actually maybe be able to point it out here if I can turn on my little thing for a second here. It's right up in this area here. So most of the convection, the cloud cover is on the northern side of the storm. And that's a sign of general disorganization. Now we're expecting as we go through the night tonight, there's wind shear coming from over this area here. It's kind of blowing it this way. We think some of this activity is going to wrap back around the storm as that wind shear lays down and gets a little bit better organized. But at least right now, the strongest activity associated with it is on the north side. And that's an indication not only that it's being sheared, but also that it's still a relatively weak storm as we go into this evening. I do want to point out kind of right off the bat here that we do have a tropical storm watch now in effect south of Sabine Pass. This does cover the coastal waters offshore 60 miles. This does not, however, include any inland areas because we're still not expecting tropical storm force winds anywhere inland. But we do have a tropical storm watch out for our coastal waters offshore where we could see some tropical storm force winds out over the open waters because, there's a lot less friction out there. So if you do have any mariners out there, hopefully not a storm like this approaching, but we do have tropical storm watches out from the coast to 60 miles offshore. But again, not actually extending inland or even to the coast. We're not expecting tropical storm force winds in our area, at least not at this time, based on the current forecast track. This is the current forecast track as of 7 p.m. This just came out from the National Hurricane Center a short time ago. I'll make this full screen for you so you can take a little bit closer look at it here. And we are looking at maximum sustained winds still near 60 miles per hour. And the overall forecast track has not really changed a whole lot. Neither has the landfall point. We're still looking at a landfall right near Port Lavaca. The timing on it has moved up a little bit. So we're looking at kind of an early morning landfall right now for the storm. That's a few hours earlier. We're looking probably midday with the previous advisories. So a little bit earlier in the day, but as far as the actual track itself, that really has not changed a whole lot. And the good news is if there is some, with the storm making landfall a little bit sooner, that may give it a little bit less time to actually develop. That said, we are still looking at it to become a Category 1 hurricane. Prior to landfall, maximum sustained winds at landfall are expected to be 85 miles per hour. So kind of a mid-range Category 1 hurricane expected as this storm actually makes landfall. Otherwise, southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana, not actually in the cone of uncertainty anymore, so that's certainly some good news. That doesn't say anything about the expected impacts. That's just where the center is going to wind up being. So we are going to be looking at still some potential for some heavy rainfall. There is going to be a tornado threat. There is going to be a storm surge threat as well. We're going to talk about all of that here in the next few minutes. But just because we're out of the cone of uncertainty doesn't mean that we're not going to see anything from this storm because, most of the storm, we're on the eastern side of the storm. That's the quote unquote dirty side, as someone so aptly put it yesterday. So we are going to be looking at some impacts, not extreme impacts, but you'll definitely notice them as we go through the next couple of days. Let me come back here a little bit. What I want to show you next here and why this is blank, because I want to switch to a different graphic here, is actually what's driving Beryl, and I'm going to leave you up here so I can actually point it out here. So here's Beryl down in the central Gulf of Mexico, and we've got a couple of features that are actually steering Beryl. One, we have this area of high pressure over the southeastern U.S. Now, winds around high pressure areas spin clockwise, so we're looking at that. That's initially what's driving Beryl to the northwest, and has been driving it to the northwest across the Gulf of Mexico. We've got another area of high pressure over here that's kind of doing a little bit of a blocking job, keeping it from going straight due west. Now, what we have up here is a trough, or an area of low pressure. This is actually what's been bringing us some showers and thunderstorms last night and a little bit today. We were actually expecting more than we got today, but still, this is a trough of low pressure. And what happens is when we have areas of low pressure, hurricanes tend to want to move towards them, essentially. Think about low pressure as a valley and high pressure kind of as a mountain. The hurricane's going to go around the mountain and into the valley area. And that's what we're going to see. Beryl is going to kind of continue on this northwesterly track, and then it's going to turn to the north, and then eventually off to the northeast and get absorbed within that trough of low pressure. So that's what's driving Beryl, and the reason behind the forecast that you see. That forecast philosophy hasn't really changed much in the last few days, and we expect that we don't expect that to change a whole lot going forward. Maybe just a little bit, a few miles one way or the other, but nothing certainly dramatic in terms of changes in the forecast track anticipated. Now, as far as conditions that it's going to be moving into, conditions are going to get gradually more and more favorable for development. You can see the Gulf waters remain very warm. We were looking at mid-80s in the southern Gulf. Now it's moving into even warmer waters, 86, 87 degrees as it moves into the northwestern Gulf of Mexico. So conditions, as far as sea surface temperatures go, are very favorable for development. The wind shear that we've been talking about, which is actually ongoing now, is supposed to actually diminish somewhat within the next 6 to 12 hours or so. So with less wind shear, that's going to also provide more favorable conditions for the storm to develop. The wind shear, let me see if I can make this full screen again to kind of identify what we're talking about here. You see Beryl there, the indicator for it. The wind shear is the yellows and the reds. And you see there is some yellow and red kind of along the northwestern and northern side of Beryl. That is going to diminish, kind of lay down here as we go through the night tonight. So conditions are going to become more favorable for Beryl to begin to intensify after staying pretty much static throughout most of the day today. Now, talking about impacts across our area, I know everybody, the big worry is, are we going to see tropical storm force winds? Are we going to see hurricane force winds? The overall probabilities have been and remain extremely low that we're going to see any significant wind-related issues with Beryl. The probabilities of seeing tropical storm force winds inland across southeast Texas range anywhere between 10 and 30%. And that 30% is right along the coastline. If I can make this full screen again for you, you can see essentially the areas highlighted in the light greens is the 20 to 30% range, perhaps right along the immediate coast of Jefferson County, maybe in the 20 to 30% range, but the rest of southeast Texas in a 10 to 20% chance. And then for our southwest Louisiana, even lower. We're generally looking at between about a 5 and 20% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. So the overall risk of tropical storm force winds with Beryl across our area is very low. We're not expecting tropical storm force winds across the area. The probabilities of seeing hurricane force winds are even lower. You can see here we're essentially less than a 5% chance of seeing hurricane force winds. So no reason to freak out about the potential for seeing winds anywhere across our area. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit breezy. We may see a 15, 20, 25 mile an hour gust. If you have a flag, it might be worth taking it down. But we're not looking at, strong winds that are going to cause any kind of significant damage across our area. That's just not anticipated unless we see some kind of dramatic change in the forecast track going forward here. As far as the time of arrival, again, we're not expecting tropical storm force winds, but if we were to see them, this is the time frame when we would see them. We'd be looking at generally late tomorrow night, probably sometime around midnight for those to start. But again, we're not expecting those to actually develop. This is just kind of a just-in-case situation. If we were to see a significant change in the forecast track, that's the time frame that we would be looking at those tropical storm force winds to begin. What we are going to be seeing a lot more of is rainfall. And we've seen a little bit of rain out there today, not nearly as much, like I said, as we anticipated. We were expecting to have quite a bit of rainfall across the area today. It was more just kind of some spotty showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. So bad forecast us. it does happen from time to time. But we are expecting an increase in rainfall, just some scattered showers and thunderstorms again as we go through the day tomorrow. But especially as we get into Monday, we're going to be looking at higher rainfall and higher rainfall totals as Beryl makes landfall and those rain bands begin to work into our area. We're probably going to see some outer rain bands even as Beryl makes landfall. And then as it begins to decay and the remnants start to shift further to the north across East Texas, we're going to see increasing rain across our area. So we're looking at the possibility of flash flooding continuing. You can see the areas highlighted in yellow here. That is a slight risk for excessive rainfall, what we call it. Let me get me out of the way here, and you can see the legend there. But essentially what we're going to be looking at is about a 15% chance of flash flooding across southeast Texas and western Louisiana. Getting a little bit further to the east, between Lake Charles and Lafayette, that risk is a little bit lower at around 5%. But we are going to be looking at a risk of flash flooding both Monday, Tuesday, and possibly even into Wednesday as well. Let me move forward here. You can see Tuesday, that slight risk, that 15% chance covers essentially all of southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana, south central Louisiana, even over further east across the Baton Rouge area to around Houma. And it also covers parts of North Louisiana because this system is going to be moving the way it's actually going to be progressing. We're going to be looking at the remnants moving up across East Texas. And generally speaking, the eastern or right side of the storm tends to have a lot more rainfall with it. So we're going to be kind of right over that. It's not going to be a wind issue, but it is going to be the potential for heavy rain. Now, here's a look at the rainfall totals, the forecast rainfall totals as we go through essentially from today through Thursday night. So this is going to take us through the entire event. You see the legend there on the right. Generally speaking, we're looking at, well, that's really weird. My TV is doing in the background there. But generally, we're looking at between 2 to up to 6 inches of rainfall across southeast Texas and western Louisiana. We could potentially see some higher amounts than that. Oftentimes when we have a decaying tropical system and just some remnants that are moving off to the northeast, it likes to leave what I call a tail, essentially just a stream of showers kind of rotating into it. And a lot of times that stream can be moving over the same area for several hours and drop very heavy rainfall or very high rainfall totals with it. So not out of the realm of possibility that we could see some rainfall totals higher than 6 inches, but generally speaking, we're looking at 2 to 6 inches of rainfall expected across the region as the remnants of Beryl move across. We do have a storm surge watch now in effect across the area, parts of the area, mainly just for coastal parts of Jefferson County. This is where we're expecting the potential for that storm surge to get a little bit higher than perhaps other areas that we cover here in southwest Louisiana. We're looking officially for the forecast is for a 2 to 4 foot storm surge across parts of coastal Jefferson County. We'll look at the graphs here in just a second. But this is going to be right along the immediate coastline. Don't see the fact that this extends inland all the way to Beaumont, that we're going to have storm surge all the way to Beaumont. That is absolutely not going to be the case. This is only for right along the immediate coastline. But we are looking at the possibility of 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, essentially from Galveston Bay to Sabine Pass. And so we do have that storm surge watch in effect. For those of you who are not familiar, a storm surge watch means that storm surge of 3 feet or greater is possible within the next 48 hours. And with a forecast of 2 to 4 feet, that falls within that storm surge watch purview. So hence why we do now have a storm surge watch in effect just for lower Jefferson County. This is a look now at the storm surge values. They're actually expected all across the Texas coastline as Beryl makes landfall. The highest is going to be 4 to 6 feet, generally from Mesquite Bay up to, is that Sargent? Is that how you pronounce that? I'm not even sure. But essentially the central Texas coastline, looking at 4 to 6 feet of storm surge, and then east from San Luis Pass to Sabine Pass, anywhere between 2 to 4, and that's where that storm surge watch comes in. We are still looking at storm surge all the way as far south as Brownsville, Texas, and the Texas Mexico border. So essentially the entire Texas coastline is at risk of seeing at least some level of storm surge as we go through Beryl's landfall here over the next couple of days. This is just a broader look at the storm surge watches and warnings that are currently in effect. The kind of hot pink color there, that's the storm surge warnings that are in effect essentially from south of Corpus Christi to just south of the Galveston area, and then storm surge watches, that extend all the way to Sabine Pass and include the coastal parts of Jefferson County. It went away. Come back. Okay. So now let's talk a little bit. I want to show you kind of these graphs here and kind of talk you through what kind of storm surge values we're actually going to be seeing here. So this is Calcasieu Pass. Each one of these, the black up and down lines are just kind of indicating each day. So starting today, going through Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. And you can see the blue line there. That is where the normal tides are expected to be. The black line above it, that is the forecast. So that is where we're expecting to see versus what we would see if there was not a tropical system making landfall. So that's essentially the storm surge. We're generally looking at 1 to maybe 1.5 feet of surge. This is mainly going to be as we get into Monday. You can see Monday is going to be the highest day for Calcasieu Pass. But it is going to be running a little bit above normal even Sunday, Tuesday. By Wednesday, it looks like we get back close to normal. But we're running about 1/2 foot above normal tomorrow, especially during the afternoon hours. That's during the high tide. And then Monday's high tide is going to be 1 foot to 1.5 feet above normal for Calcasieu Pass. Taking a look at Texas Point, this is where the storm surge watch is in effect for. Very similar overall timing, but we're going to be looking at a little bit higher values. So you see that the black line there tops out around 2. So that's going to be about 2 feet above where we would typically be. And same thing for Sunday, a little bit lower, but we're looking at about 1/2 foot above. Monday is going to be the biggest day for potential coastal flooding. And Texas Point and parts of Southeast Texas, you are likely to see the most significant, at least across our area, as far as coastal flooding goes. We're looking at around 2 feet of surge. Finally, taking a look at Llama, this is kind of a proxy for South Central Louisiana in and around Vermilion Bay. We're going to be looking at generally between about 1/2 foot above normal Sunday afternoon, and then as we head into Monday's high tide, we're looking at 1 foot to maybe 1.25 feet above normal. Same thing, actually. This one goes into Tuesday, significantly higher than normal at about 1 foot to 1.5 feet above normal high tide. So we are going to be looking at some noticeable coastal flooding across the area. This is going to be at least as strong or as significant, if not slightly more so, than what we saw with Tropical Storm Alberto a couple of weeks ago. I've kind of been using that as a proxy. If you saw impacts or issues with coastal flooding from Alberto, you're likely to see some impacts with this system as it makes landfall. Finally, the last threat that we're going to be dealing with is going to be the potential for tornadoes. And there is going to be a risk of tornadoes as we go through the next few days. This is a look at tomorrow. And the tornado threat is going to be confined essentially to Jefferson County, southern parts of Hardin County, maybe western Orange counties. But this is going to be as those outer rain bands from Beryl approach and begin to make landfall. There's always a risk of tornadoes, and we are going to be looking at that tornado risk again with as this system approaches the coastline. The tornado threat, this is the probabilities. The areas highlighted in green is a 2 to 4% probability. So we're looking at essentially a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado across Jefferson County and southern Hardin County. A little bit higher in that brown area, a 5 to 9% chance. That's just going to be extreme southwestern Jefferson County. Now, heading into Monday, we're going to be looking at that tornado threat expanding across pretty much all of southeast Texas and extreme western Louisiana. Again, this is as the storm makes landfall and begins to move inland. Those bands will begin to spread a little bit further inland, so the overall tornado risk will continue. I don't have graphics yet for Tuesday and Wednesday, but I do expect that we're going to be looking at a tornado threat at least through Tuesday. Wednesday's still a little bit iffy. The storm will be moving off by then. We may not have much left in our area by that point, but Tuesday is going to be another day that we're going to have to keep an eye on the potential for tornadic development. Taking a quick look at the next couple of few days, obviously it's going to be pretty wet with the landfall and subsequent remnants of Beryl moving across the region. We're going to be looking at high precipitation chances each day, 50 to 60% tomorrow, 60 to 80% Monday, 70 to 90% on Tuesday. The silver lining, if there is one, is that all the cloud cover and the rain should keep temperatures a little bit cooler. We actually may top out in the upper 80s for some areas across the region, due mainly to that heavy rainfall and clouds. So it'll be cooler, but it's not going to be pleasant to get out in and actually enjoy the cooler weather. But hey, at least we're not going to fry in the 110-degree heat index. So there's always that. That's kind of the choice you have around here this time of year. Either you fry or you die in a hurricane. Let's not make that a thing. That sounds a bit macabre. That's what we have for you this evening here at the National Weather Service. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in our comment section. We'll answer them here over the next little while. We are going to plan to do another one of these briefings tomorrow evening. We may do one tomorrow morning, depending on how things evolve, but we'll definitely plan to do another one tomorrow evening. So be on the lookout for that. For the latest and greatest at that time. I'm going to go ahead and back up here all the way to the beginning of my briefing here so I can get the latest track up there on the screen, and come over here so you can hang out with me while I do check to see if we have any questions. Throw them on in there. Let me check real quick here. I'm going to back up a little bit and see if there's any that I missed. I'm sure there are plenty that I've missed. Michelle says, I'm traveling from Arkansas to Lake Charles tomorrow. Would it be safe for me to drive? You may run into some scattered showers and thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon, but as far as impacts from Beryl, you shouldn't have any. You should be fine. Let's see. Christy says, we're just going to get rain. Yep, you're going to get a lot of rain. That's kind of the bottom line here. Yeah, you're right. Dietrich's asking about what about flooding for Orange. There is going to be a risk of flooding for Orange, not just Orange, but pretty much all of Southeast Texas and parts of Western Louisiana. So we're looking at essentially, especially as we get into Monday, you're in that slight risk for flash flooding. Move me over here so you can see the legend there. And then going into Tuesday, the entire, really the entire state almost of Eastern Texas and Louisiana is going to be at risk for seeing some flash flooding. So yes, flooding is going to be an issue with this system. Big Johnson says, are you optimistic that Beryl will not track more eastward to cause Lake Charles greater negative impacts? At this point, I don't think there's going to be any dramatic changes to the forecast track. The computer models have kind of gotten into a lot better agreement than they were yesterday. I know we saw a pretty significant shift in the track yesterday, but we haven't really seen that last night or today, and I don't expect dramatic shifts between now and the time the storm makes landfall. Dwayne asks, when it strengthens potentially rapidly once the shear ceases tomorrow, is there the possibility it feels that weakness earlier with the trough of low pressure sooner and makes that more northeasterly turn earlier than expected? Well, first off, we're not expecting rapid intensification. You know, it is going to intensify steadily, but we're not expecting the kind of rapid intensification that we saw when the storm was kind of in the Western Atlantic as it went through the Caribbean. That's not expected at this point. As far as will it feel that earlier, all of our computer models indicate no. There's no real good reason for us to think otherwise at this point. The models are in good agreement on this eventual track. There is a little bit of left and right, kind of variation between them, but it's not significant. So no, I don't expect dramatic changes between now and then with that. Anastasia says, good job, Don. Thank you and all the guys at the U.S. National Weather Service, Lake Charles, Louisiana. Well, thank you, Anastasia. We certainly appreciate that. Lori says 15 to 20 miles per hour is a normal day here on the Bayou. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little breezy, but it's not going to be too bad. It's not going to be anything that you're going to you have to get nervous about. Natalie says, so no hurricane party? No, sorry, Natalie, no hurricane party this time. You'll have to wait till August. Let's hope not. Tasha asks, I just want to know if we should be worried about flooding Monday or more Tuesday or Wednesday. It's probably going to be more Tuesday. Tuesday is probably going to be the biggest overall risk day for flooding. There is going to be rain around Monday, but I think the higher risk for flash flooding is going to be more so on Tuesday. This is Monday, and you are in that slight risk depending on where you are for Southeast Texas and Western Louisiana. But you can see by Tuesday that slight risk covers a much larger area, that yellow area. So I think the more significant risk just in general is going to be on Tuesday, but we could still see some flash flooding across Southeast Texas on Monday. Tammy says, I heard there is Saharan dust out east. I guess you meant east. That will halt any more storm. Right now, there is some Saharan dust out there, and yeah, there are no storms that are expected to develop anytime in the next 7 days. That is probably playing a role, and that's not unusual for this time of year. Usually in July, we do see that Saharan dust kind of moving across the Atlantic. Beryl was kind of an outlier. It's not something Beryl broke several records. So it wasn't necessarily expected to be a trend necessarily. We're still very early in the hurricane season. So yeah, there may be a lull period here for a couple of weeks where we don't see anything develop, and that would certainly be okay with me. Dane asks, will Southeast Texas or Southwest Louisiana get anything bad? Again, we're looking at the biggest risk is going to be the potential for heavy rainfall. There is a low-end tornado risk, but we're not expecting anything as far as hurricane winds or anything like that. Galen asks, how bad does the weather look for spring Texas? I'm not sure where spring Texas is. That's actually going to be outside of the area that we cover. So you're going to have to find the Weather Service office that covers that area specifically, and they can give you a better idea of that. Natalie says, so basically Lafayette just has to watch for the storms coming from the dirty side, and once it curves to the top of Louisiana, and the rain coming down from there too. Yeah, more or less. Rain's going to be the biggest issue for the Lafayette area, yes. But I don't think, the further east we get, the lower the overall risk is going to be. You are going to be in that slight risk on Tuesday for the potential for flash flooding. You can see that there. But I think the overall risk is going to be fairly low as you get further to the east. Okay, let's see. Give me just a moment. I'm just running through comments here. Felix asks if water spouts are going to be on the rise. There very well could be some water spouts with this system. Anytime we're talking the same kind of idea or the same processes that have these quick spin up tornadoes on land can also produce water spouts over the coastal waters. Felix is actually a former employee here, so he knows that. He doesn't need me to answer that question. Reema's asking about the time of arrival of significant rain. We're going to be looking at the rain beginning. Well, we're going to be looking at some scattered showers and thunderstorms tomorrow. The more significant rain associated with Beryl is going to arrive on Monday, and then going to kind of continue through Tuesday. We're probably still going to be seeing a few showers and thunderstorms around as late as Wednesday as well. But I think the biggest days for rainfall are going to be Monday and Tuesday. Gloria says Spring, Texas is located west or northwest of Houston, and I have family there. So the Houston office actually would cover that. But generally speaking, you are going to be looking at a fair amount of rainfall, and the storm is going to be moving just to the west of the Houston area as either a depression or a remnant low. So your biggest issue is going to be the potential for heavy rainfall. It's going to be breezy over there, but you're not going to be looking at hurricane force winds in or around the Houston area. Terry asked about hurricane snackies. You can have hurricane snackies anytime, but we don't actually have a hurricane to have hurricane snackies for. Nick asks, what do you think about this hurricane season, Don, and what makes this year such a high forecast compared to average? Well, there's a few factors with that. For one, we're moving from an El Nino pattern into a La Nina pattern, and that tends to favor tropical development in the Atlantic. We also have extremely warm sea surface temperatures across pretty much the entire Atlantic, or at least the entire tropical Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. We saw that very early on here with Beryl. And then also we're looking at low wind shear generally across a large swath of the tropical Atlantic. So that's kind of why we're expecting an above normal hurricane season this year. And that still looks to be the case. Those factors haven't changed any. Janet asks, do I need to move 10-inch diameter flower pots indoors in Beaumont? Probably not. That's going to have some heft to them. I don't think the winds are going to be nearly strong enough to mess those up. Khalil is asking, are tornadoes going to be a big threat here at Southwest Louisiana? Not a big threat. There is going to be a low-end risk of tornadoes. We do have a lot of times in those rain bands of even decaying tropical systems, we'll get a threat of a few spin-up tornadoes for late tomorrow night. This is showing. As we get into Monday, that risk will extend a little bit further west into Southwest Louisiana. So you can see there is a low-end risk of tornadoes, essentially from Lake Charles east. This does, all the way as far east as Lafayette, down towards New Iberia, up towards Alexandria. The areas highlighted in those dark green areas, that's a marginal risk for tornadoes. So yeah, there will be a risk of tornadoes Monday, possibly even into Tuesday. I don't have a graphic for that, but there will be a general risk of tornadoes with these rain bands as the storm decays and moves inland, yes. Nettie's asking, should summer school be canceled in Southeast Texas? That's out of my purview. I don't have any control or say in that whatsoever. Generally, I would say no. We're not looking at anything life-threatening enough for Southeast Texas, unless we get some of this flash flooding developing specifically in those areas. But from a wind perspective or anything like that, no, I don't expect that to be a concern. Christy says it's moving so slow. It's not moving extremely slow. It has slowed down from where it was moving through the Caribbean. It's presently moving at 13 miles an hour, and that's kind of what it's been moving at for the last 24 hours or so. And I expect it to kind of stay right around that, between about 10 and 13 miles an hour all the way up to landfall. Now, as it starts to make this turn, storms tend to slow down a little bit as they start to turn. So we may see it drop its speed a little bit, but this is not a situation where we're expecting the storm to stall for any significant length of time. I know a lot of people are worried about having a situation like Harvey or something like that, where the storm just sits and dumps copious amounts of rainfall for days. This storm is expected to keep moving, and that low pressure area, that trough that we talked about at the beginning of the briefing, is the main reason why. It's going to get absorbed up into that. Joshua asks, is Beryl going to retire the name if the islands count other than just the mainland of North America? That is up to a group called the World Meteorological Organization. They're the ones that actually develop the names, and if they decide that it did enough damage or killed enough people, it's not exactly arbitrary, but it's kind of an art form as whether they decide a storm's going to be retired or not. My guess is not. But I'm not, the fact that it did break several records, it was the earliest hurricane, the earliest Category 4 and earliest Category 5 hurricane in recorded history, so that may be enough for it. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what they decide to do with that. But that's well outside of my control. What time is the next Weather Service video update? On Sunday, it's going to be Sunday evening. I think probably around the same time, probably around 7:30 tomorrow evening. Joel asked, would there be any straight line winds with this or nothing? Well, it's not a thunderstorm per se. If hurricanes could technically be considered a straight-ish line winds, even though it rotates around the storm. But we're not expecting any significant winds across our area, Southeast Texas or Southwest Louisiana, with this. It's not a severe weather event when we're expecting these individual storms to push out these strong straight line winds. So no, there's not really any risk of that. Derek says, DJ, my man, where you been? Greetings from Oregon, where it's 111. It's 111 in Oregon. And here I thought maybe I can move inland, get off the coast, get away from hurricanes, go somewhere cooler. If it's 111 in Oregon, what hope do the rest of us have? Natalie says, so there'll be another Beryl name in 6 more years. If they don't retire it, yes. That they rotate on a 6-year basis. So the next one would be would be right back in 6 years. Yep. Lori asks, in terms of hours, how wide is Beryl? Like, how long would it take to fully get on land? I don't have an exact diameter of Beryl right now. It's probably going to take roughly about, if I had to guess, probably somewhere around 8 hours from the time the bands start moving inland till the center actually makes landfall and the backside moves in. Somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 hours would be my guess, but I don't have an exact diameter for you. Chantal is asking about how much rain in the Ragley area we'll get. We're in a flood area. Yeah, we are going to be looking at anywhere between 2 and 6 inches of rain, and it's good that you're focusing on that because that is going to be the biggest issue that we're going to be looking at. Now, I can't tell you exactly how much rain Ragley is going to get. Unfortunately, I'm not that good. But generally, we're looking at anywhere between 2 to 6 inches of rain across the area. That's going to be essentially from tomorrow all the way through Wednesday. So it's not going to happen necessarily all at once. It's not going to be one, rain band that's going to drop 6 inches of rain on you. But over that 3-day period, we could be looking at up to 6 inches of rain. Reed is asking, are we anticipating flooding? That could lead to the potential for flash flooding. Yes, we do have a risk of flooding across the areas. Essentially starting late Sunday night, but continuing Monday and especially Tuesday, we're looking at the potential for some flash flooding, yes. Holly asks, are you sure everyone isn't undershooting the effects this will have on Southeast Texas? No, I don't think so. I mean, we're being pretty straight with what we think is going to happen. We think the biggest threat is going to be the heavy rainfall. We do have that low-end storm surge risk for the coastal flooding. We're looking at 2 to 4 feet of storm surge right along the coastline of Jefferson County. That's going to be the kind of the biggest issue that we see with this system. There is a low-end tornado threat as well. So, all of the threats, with the exception of the wind, is going to be there. We're just not anticipating significant winds with this because the storm is moving inland well to the south, and it's going to be decaying by the time it gets up this way. But, heavy rain, low-end tornado threat, low-end storm surge threat right along the coastline, those are all going to be issues for Southeast Texas. Coming back. Elizabeth says, Donald Jones! Elizabeth Danielle! Travis says 2 to 6 inches, possible heavier area, so normal time thunderstorms. It's not a normal thunderstorm per se because it's part of a tropical system, but it's not going to be too incredibly different than what we see in some of those heavier thunderstorms during the summer. Walt's asking, what is the chance for rapid intensification with this storm? We're not expecting rapid intensification. Is it impossible? No, certainly not. But we're not expecting rapid intensification. We are expecting slow intensification. It's already at 60 miles an hour. The forecast maximum wind speed at landfall is 85 miles per hour. So we've got about 30-ish hours or thereabout because we're looking at landfall late tomorrow night, early Monday morning. So a 25-mile-an-hour gain between in about 30 hours would not necessarily be a rapid intensification, but it is going to intensify. We're looking at a mid-range Category 1 hurricane expected at landfall. Karen asked about how many hours do you expect or anticipate Hardin, Jefferson, and Orange counties to have heavy rains. It's going to be a long duration thing, but it's not necessarily going to be constant. We're going to be looking at rain beginning as early as very late tomorrow night and continuing through possibly as late as Wednesday evening. Now, it's not going to be nonstop rain for that entire period of time, but we are going to be looking at rain bands moving through on and off for that kind of 3-day period. Pamela says, Oregon's also muggy and hot. I'd love for my family to move there, but they have flooding, mudslides, and wildfires. That's always something. If it's not hurricanes, it's tornadoes or wildfires, or you always have something to be concerned about. Natalie says, I heard Beryl made the earliest big hurricane in the season now since hitting the Bahamas and areas as a high cat. It was the earliest Category 4 hurricane on record, and it was the earliest Category 5 hurricane on record, and it beat that previous record by over 2 weeks. The previous record, I think, was Hurricane Emily, which was a 2005 storm, which was a really bad year. That was the year of Katrina and Rita. And it beat that in terms of time by about 2 weeks. So yeah, it is a record-breaking storm. Don asked, do you see any surprises with this one? I remember prepping for one maybe 2 years ago that was supposed to directly hit in East Texas, only to have it shift and slam into Louisiana. We never expect surprises. If we did, they wouldn't be surprises. But no, we're not anticipating significant changes to this forecast track. Really, I mean, we have that cone of uncertainty where we're outside of it at the moment. We could see some, a little bit of a shift one way or the other, but I'm not expecting a dramatic shift of this storm into Southeast Texas or Southwest Louisiana, not as a hurricane. We may see some of the remnants move through, but I'm not expecting a landfall in Southeast Texas or Southwest Louisiana. All right, not saying too many more questions at the moment, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here for the time being. Again, we will do another one of these briefings tomorrow evening. We'll plan for 7:30. I'll have the information about that posted on our social media pages then. We may do another briefing tomorrow morning, depending on how the storm behaves overnight, and if it's starting to get its act together, or if anything significant changes, we'll provide an update for then tomorrow morning. But otherwise, plan on our next briefing being tomorrow evening, and we'll have all the latest and greatest information for you then at that time. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. If you have a question that I missed for some reason, send us a direct message on Facebook, shoot us a message on Twitter or X, whatever they call it now. We're also on YouTube, although I don't think you can message us on YouTube. You can also send me an email directly if you'd like. Email is on your screen there. It's my name with a dot in the middle, Donald.Jones at NOAA.gov. You can also give us a call here at the office. We have forecasters here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at the number on your screen, area code 337-477-5285. And if you want the personal touch, we'll be happy to talk to you that way. Again, next briefing tomorrow evening, 7:30. Otherwise, or if earlier in the morning, if we have a significant change that we need to talk about. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe, stay safe, stay dry, stay cool, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.